Cern Basher has returned with another slide deck filled with super interesting stuff about how we are going to pay off the national debt. Thank you, Cern. We've been looking for somebody to be after Trump. So 4 years from now, we'll be looking forward to voting for you, as you have.
No, I'm like Elon. I wasn't born here.
Oh, that's right.
Can't vote for Elon and he can't vote for Cern.
No, darn. And you guys are solving all the problems. I mean,
well, one of us is. One of us is.
Well, you're gonna explain how Elon's gonna solve the problem.
Exactly right. Yes, I can do that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll turn it over to you then for how that's going to happen.
Sounds good. But first of all, we have to figure out whether Elon's good or evil.
Yeah, well,
because if he's evil, then he's not going to solve the problem. He's going to make things worse.
Right.
And this isn't going to be a political discussion, but there's a lot of talk, these days. Obviously, you see the articles that are slanted against Elon. And my 2 cents on all this comes from Walter Isaacson's book. And I pulled out some quotes from his book. Actually, my business partner reminded me of these quotes. So thank you to her for sending these to me. But just, I'm not going to read all this, but just the first one here. The explosion of the Starship was emblematic of Musk, a fitting metaphor for his compulsion to aim high, act impulsively, take wild risks, and accomplish amazing things. Right? And his life had long been a mixture of historically transforming achievements, along with wild flameouts, broken promises, and arrogant impulses. Both his accomplishments and his failures were epic, and that made him revered by fanboys and reviled by critics. Right. So part of it is, I think, understanding, where Elon came from, and Walter's book did a good job, I think, of giving us an understanding of Elon's upbringing and his history. Right. So who is this man, and why is he wired the way he is?
And people, the average guy on the street just doesn't understand the entrepreneurial journey. They don't understand the entrepreneurial journey in that any entrepreneur is a risk taker. And if he's taking risks, you're going to have failures. People, I get some complaints in my notes. My folks that are talking about these videos are speaking to me on X and saying, Randy, how many companies have you really started? I don't know. I've lost track. It's somewhere over 40. I don't know. It could be 45, 50. What is a company anyway? Is when you start out as an Amway distributor, is that a company? Well, of course it is. If you start a rock band in your teens, yes, that's a company. So I count some of these things. I don't count some of the other ones. But the reality is, out of those 50, 45 or 50, however many companies it's been, some of them lasted only months because they were failure. You could tell right away, this is not going to work. Some of them lasted a year or lasted 2 years. Some of them lasted 5. One of them lasted 28 years, 29 years, depends on what you count as lasting. Anyway, you have all these possibilities one way or another. And Elon, within those major companies he started, has all the smaller divisions, especially of Tesla, some of which have not turned out that big to be that great a deal, like the solar roofs. So you have people have to understand that that's part of the journey.
It is. And it's also just the human as well, right? I think to simplistically call somebody good or evil,
right,
is too simplistic. And the point that Walter's making here is that, it's part of the same cloth, and you can't just pull out the bad part.
Right.
Right. And if you unravel the cloth, do you lose the benefits, right? Do you lose everything?
Right. I've used the theory, I've called it the Pillsbury Doughboy theory. And that is, you picture the Pillsbury Doughboy, and you look at the Pillsbury Doughboy, well, he's kind of fat. Well, if you poke your finger into his tummy, in order to try to reduce his tummy, then something's going to pop out the back. And so I know that I'm weird. I know that Elon's weird. You're probably weird. I don't know you well enough to know how weird you
No,
be.
no, I'm not weird.
You're not weird at all. But you push on that weirdness, and you might be pushing out something that you wanted in that weird person. So this is what I would be concerned about. I think that's what that next quote, but would a restrained Musk accomplish as much as Musk unbound? So go ahead. I'll turn it back over to you.
No, I think that's right. And then the end of that, the last line, crazy enough to think they can change the world. Like you need somebody kind of nuts to think that he can change the world in the ways that Musk is trying to change the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. A lot of people, I think, have had ideas, but to actually go out and try it and execute it and move the amount of earth that you have to move to change the world, that is not easy.
No, and once again, I hate to talk about myself so much in this particular video, but I years ago put together a plan to build what was called Jerusalem West, which would have been a theme park in Los Angeles that would have duplicated all of the city of Jerusalem. It's about the same size as Disneyland, about 100 acres. And so the walls, the inside, what it would have looked like in the time of Christ. I had a board of directors. I had a plan for raising the money. I had a complete layout of what the park would look like, the parking, everything else. I mean, this was a serious plan, but it never got executed. Great plan, but no execution. So this is the craziness of the entrepreneur, to think that they could possibly do something like that. But then, boy, when you get a guy like Elon who actually executes, now you're talking about genius.
Prototypes are easy, production is hard, right?
There you go.
Same idea. Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing that has happened is as you go along the way, and this cartoon, I think, kind of encapsulates this, you make some enemies along the way.
Yeah.
If you are going to remove the earth off of fossil fuels over time, you're going to make some enemies.
Right.
And Elon is not just doing that, right? There's a whole bunch of other industries that Elon is disrupting along the way. So here's the guy in the bar talking to the barrel of oil. Say, didn't you used to be somebody? Right? And let's hope, for future generations, let's hope actually this is the case.
Right.
Now, not that oil is going away. Oil is important for all kinds of things.
Sure.
But hopefully we stop using it to power vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll make us a lot healthier too. All right. Switching gears. Robots. Last week, Rethink X, Adam Dorr had a great blog post and questioning how much we should invest in humanoid robotics. You and I talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for those that didn't see that, please go back and watch that episode. But this chart got me thinking. This is a chart of the total federal debt as a percentage of GDP. And you can see right now we're at about 125%. Debt is 125% of our GDP.
Right.
We have more debt than the economy produces in a given year.
Right.
Now, on the surface of it, you may say, okay, what's the big deal? Like maybe in my house, I have more mortgage debt than what my income is.
Right.
Okay, true. I would also say that this understates things. There's actually a lot of other debt that the government has and unfunded obligations the government has beyond this that actually could push this number up to 300, 400, 500% if you measure everything, maybe even more. But also if you look at it relative to history, and one way to think about debt is you are borrowing from the future, right? You're taking money today to do something with it, and you have to pay that money back in the future. And so will that hinder future generations' ability to do things?
Right.
And what is the right number? And you can see the last time we were at this level was after the Second World War. And that kind of made sense. If you're going to win the war, you better spend whatever you need to spend to win the war. Fine. But why is the number so high today, right? Why are we spending so much? What's the problem here? And then the other question is, how long can this last? All right. Those are all the questions, and people have talked about this before. But Adam's blog post, RethinkX blog post, kind of got me thinking, if humanoid robots could be used to the extent that they were talking about, and I and others have been talking about that too in different ways, what could we do with the national debt? What could we pay it off? So let's explore that. This is RethinkX humanoid bot ROI calculator, and I'll just run through this real quick just so people have an understanding of what we're talking about here. If the bot costs $30,000 over its lifetime, the bot lasts 5 years. They were talking initially about 10 million robots, right? And if the robot has the productivity of a human, okay? And the average human worker in the United States contributes about $100,000 to GDP. All right. So that works out to about $6,000 a year for each robot. It would be investing about $60 billion to get 10 million robots. And that would be almost a $1 trillion increase in GDP. Right? So pretty phenomenal. So for a 0.2% of GDP cost, you get a 3.5%, 3.6% increase in GDP. It's a 15x multiplier. Okay. So here's how that looks graphically. So the 10 million is down here on the left in the red. There are 170 million workers in the United States. Right? So let's say we had one robot for every worker, then you would get a 60% boost to GDP.
I see.
And if you wanted to double GDP, 100% increase in GDP, you would need 280 million robots.
Got it.
Okay. Now, let's say RethinkX numbers are overly optimistic. Let's say the bots cost twice as much as they thought, so 60,000. And let's say the bots are only half as productive as a human.
Wow.
Right? Still pretty good numbers. Now, what I did with this chart was assume as we start making millions and millions of bots, the cost comes down and the bots become as productive. So initially,
I see.
it's half the benefit that RethinkX was modeling. And then as you go along, the benefit grows because the bots are developing. Right. So just think what we could do if we could double GDP.
Yeah.
But let's not stop there. Right. 336 million bots, 120% growth in GDP, 840 million robots, that's a 300% growth in GDP. And if you had 1.6 billion robots, that's 600% growth in GDP. Now, this is holding all things equal, and there's problems with that.
Right.
Right, because this eventually will be a deflationary force on the economy. But the point is still that if you can massively increase the labor force, you're getting this massive increase in GDP. And that might help the government potentially, if they do it wisely, take some of that money and pay down our debt. So right now, the US government collects about $4 trillion a year in taxes. Right? So if we double GDP, look at the numbers down here to the left. And let's say the government can collect another $4 trillion in taxes. And let's say that they only take $1 trillion of that extra money and use that to pay down debt. Right? The debt gets paid down pretty quickly. You're looking at 20, 25 years, something like that. So we have really 3 options, right, to dealing with the debt. Is continuing down the path that we're on, and over time inflation erodes the value of our money, and therefore the amount that you have to pay back in future dollars is less. Right. We could tax more. If you want to pay down the debt, you bump up taxes. I don't think anybody would vote for that. Or you can grow your way out of it. And I would prefer option 3 if we could. And
Cern, you forgot option 4. You could cut the size of government. I notice you didn't include that when I'm sure you knew it. I'm sure you were aware of the idea.
Well, that doesn't do anything to pay down the current debt, but yes, in the future, it helps to avoid paying the future debt, like adding to the debt. But yes, you're right.
I was just saying, I was trying to be a little ironic there because we know that the government is not going to be cut in its size. So
Yeah, and that's also why I suggested that the government doesn't take the extra 4 trillion and just apply it to debt. They're
right.
also going to spend that on something.
Right. Right.
Right. And also, frankly, if we're going to be deploying this many robots in the economy, people probably are losing their jobs to some degree.
Right.
So there's going to have to be, you know, some extra money applied somewhere to help things along the way. But in theory, if you can double the size of the labor force or triple or quadruple the size of the labor force, GDP will grow. We create an abundance like we've never had before.
Right.
And that actually could be our way out of this massive problem that we have that only seems to be getting worse. And I would suggest here that this little line here that ticks down in 2029 is actually is hopeful. I don't think there's any reality associated with that.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you're only talking about the robots because there's obviously robotic cars that will have some of the same kind of impact. You have all of AI that will have some of the same kind of impact. You have other areas of potential embodied AI that is going to be impacting the economy. So there's all the things that Tony Sebit talks about in terms of the way we grow food. We may be going back to localized production of food, even in our own backyards, using new techniques that would allow us to easily grow food, you know, on our patio. So lots and lots of ways that this new economy could be so productive that the GDP would dramatically increase and/or we could pay off debt.
That's right. And I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier when I said the extra trillion per year could pay off the debt in 20, 25 years. That's actually not correct because we have about 35 trillion in debt.
Ah, okay.
So that would take about 35 years excluding interest costs.
Okay.
If we took 2 trillion of that extra 4 trillion, then you could pay it off much faster. But
Right.
yeah, this is a big issue. And I sincerely hope that humanoid robots and AI in general, as you said, help us with this. We need to become a lot more productive. If we don't, there's some pain ahead for future generations.
It's true.
Yeah. All right. Another thing, this was kind of interesting. This is from Brian Armstrong, I believe is the CEO at Coinbase, if I'm not mistaken. They have witnessed their first AI to AI crypto transaction.
I see.
Right. And the bots didn't use, you know, Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. They used tokens,
Huh.
LLM tokens, large language model tokens. So this is kind of interesting because if we have intelligent AI agents operating for us, they may well set up their own monetary system. Like, it could be very interesting to see actually what they decide to develop. They're going to want something that's frictionless and basically free. And as far as I know, humanoid robots can't open a bank account at JPMorgan Chase just yet. So they're going to have to come up with something. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. This bears further watching as things develop. All right, this guy, he's walking along with his friend. He says, "My investing style is old school. Years of tradition unimpeded by progress." Well, if that's your investment style now, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a little bit of unsolicited investment advice.
There you go.
Yeah. So here's an example of that, Randy.
Oh boy.
This is from a slide, according to AJ, from January 9th, 2020, shown to investors in New York. Okay. And Volkswagen here says, "However, our company valuation is not where it should be!" Exclamation mark. Okay. And at that time, they were an $89 billion company. And as AJ noted here on the right, the market cap has dropped by almost 50% since then.
Wow.
Okay. And Tesla, which is right next to them there on the right at 56 billion, has 10x since then.
Wow.
So they were right.
Yeah.
Their market cap wasn't where it should be. Investors should have listened to them. Yeah. So it's great looking at these things in hindsight, isn't it?
Sure.
It's obvious now. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Renault's CEO says the sector could face billions in fines as EV sales slow. What does that mean? Well, it means that the industry is required to have a certain amount of vehicles and to meet EVs or other low carbon vehicles to meet the emissions requirements that they have in various jurisdictions. Right. And so again, thanks to AJ, he's saying regulatory credits for Tesla are likely to remain high, and he's modeling out 700 million for this third quarter that we're in now. Now that's a little bit of to me, it's a little bit of a shot in the dark. I don't know how AJ actually models this other than, best guess. But still, the point is with what Renault is saying, as companies are cutting back on EVs, they're going to have to buy regulatory credits from Tesla and other EV-only companies.
Yeah.
Okay. So this could be a nice continuing business line for Tesla that one day is going away.
Yes, right.
All right. Internal combustion engine vehicle market share in China. Look at this decline. It's gone from 96.6% in 2019 down to 46% in basically 5 years.
Right.
50% drop in 5 years.
Yep.
In China. It's unbelievable. Now, EVs have picked up, well, I'll show you here, EVs have picked up some of the slack, but it's not just EVs.
Right.
All right, this is China vehicle sales have declined for the 5th consecutive month on a year-over-year basis in China. So about 1.9 million vehicles in the month. It's a big auto market, world's largest auto market. Okay. And despite overall weakening in sales, you can see that BEVs have grown year over year, about a 19% growth year over year in August. Okay. And for the first time, BEVs, battery electric vehicles, exceeded 30% of total vehicle sales in August. Or if you prefer to smooth this out on a rolling 3-month or a quarterly basis, it's 28.8%.
Yeah.
So good for BEVs. Now, plug-in hybrids are also taking share.
Right.
Away from just internal combustion vehicles. Okay. For Tesla, year to date now, they have surpassed the number of EVs they've sold in China. They were trailing all year, and they just surpassed. So that's good. So they're off to a record year in China, if this is sustained.
Right.
And I think Elon said the other day that they're running flat out in Shanghai.
It's correct. And AJ and others are predicting that they will have a record quarter and then another record quarter.
Yep. Here is the Tesla China vehicle registrations on a trailing 12-week period, so trailing quarterly. We're back up to close to record levels, 160,000 vehicles per quarter. After some blips along the way. You can see these numbers are highly volatile.
Right.
Yeah. How about Europe? So EV market share in Europe is increasing. That because a lot of the incentives have been removed, it's created a little bit of volatility in the trends and the adoption trends. So we're looking at about 13-14% adoption right now of BEVs in Europe.
Right.
And that's moved up in the last 2.5 years from about 10% to where it is now, with some significant peaks and valleys along the way. Okay.
Yep.
For those that want to see it by country, there's a lot of numbers on this chart, but Norway is at 92%. Denmark is number 2 or 50%, 51. Sweden at 34, Netherlands at 30, Belgium at 30, and Iceland at 30, Luxembourg at 30. And then Finland is at 25% and on down. The trailing countries are from the bottom, Slovakia at 2.6%, Poland 2.7, Slovenia 3.2, Italy 3.4.
Hmm.
Spain is also pretty low at 4.6. So there's definitely some opportunity and growth in many of these countries. Overall in Europe at the 13.6. So not bad.
Yeah.
This is in Europe. In the last 2.5 years, iSales lost 10% market share and have dropped below 50% market share for the first time. So not quite as steep of a decline as we've seen in China, but heading in the right direction.
Right.
Okay. And then to round things out, to show the success that Toyota is having with their alternative strategy, this is their global fuel cell vehicle sales on a monthly basis. And this is not in thousands. So that 97 you see there in July, that's 97 vehicles. So this trend is not looking so good for them.
Yeah, well, you notice, I mean, I'm a big fan of Hyundai, but Hyundai and General Motors have just put together a new deal which includes talking about future hydrogen sales. And somebody else, was it Geely the other day, I think? And somebody else also said they were investigating hydrogen. So I see a big future for hydrogen. What are you talking about here, Cern?
Well, talk is cheap, Randy. Talk is cheap. Let's see some numbers, right? Yeah. And in the talk is cheap category, you've segued perfectly into this next slide. This is Lucid.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a good reaction. Here is some data that these are Lucid projections from May of 2021. Okay, so they were saying in 2021 that in 2023, they would sell 49,000 vehicles. Okay, so remember that number, 49,023.
yeah.
And that in 2024, they would almost double it to 90,000 vehicles. Okay, these weren't 10-year projections. They were just for a couple, 3 years out.
Right.
Okay, any idea how many vehicles Lucid sold last year?
I think it was less, right around 10,000.
6.
6, yeah, less than 10, yeah.
Right? This bar here. So they were projecting 49 and they sold 6. So I don't know. I'm not good at math, Randy, but did they miss that by much? Was it close? Do you think the CEO should get a huge performance award for that?
Absolutely. And I'm sure he does too.
Yeah. So again, I want Lucid to succeed. It's not looking good, however.
No, but their motor weighs less than Tesla's motor.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess you could say this is a favorable trend here. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to our Cybertruck theme. Always have to close with the beautiful image of Cybertrucks, and I hope that a lot of people out there get to have the same experience that I just had with my family, with my kids, surprising them with the truck. If you can surprise them, do it. You'll never forget their reaction. I won't forget that for a long time to come. The joy on kids' faces when they see the Cybertruck is amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, so you brought the good news. It's not even good news Monday through Friday. It's just the regular show. We don't call it good news, but you certainly, talking about the idea that the U.S. Deficit could go away. I mean, how much better can the news be than that?
How crazy is that idea, Randy?
Right. And an enormous wealth. I talk about it in terms of the least wealthy people in the world are the third world nations coming up to U.S. middle class standards. That would be kind of a great next goal. We've seen the third world nations come out of abject poverty to the point where there are very few people in the world that are still in abject poverty, which I think is $1 a day or $2 a day. I forget what the number is, but there's a very small remainder of people in that position. And a lot of those, in fact, almost all of those still do know where their next meal is coming from, and actually can read and write, and do go to school. The kids go to school. I mean, these are major changes in the last 100 years. in terms of literacy, in terms of food being plentiful, in terms of good shelter, disease, water availability, all these kinds of things have dramatically improved in the last 100 years. So it's not crazy to think about another step change on the order of, say, China's step change, or even Singapore's step change. Singapore was a bombed out country that had not seen prosperity for 400 years as of 1950, when they started their amazing growth story. And now I know it's a small little island, but Singapore is now has the most millionaires per capita of any country in the world. So it can happen. And so this is not, when we sing this tune, it's not crazy talk. It's a potential reality.
It's the opportunity for any country in the world with any forward-thinking leaders to position themselves in a way that they've never had the opportunity to do before.
Yep.
It really is. It really is. Now, as much as I'm excited about a lot of the, developing world to come up to our standards, there are a lot of other changes that have to be made in addition to the technology. And I'll just share a quick story. So my wife is from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
We were traveling there the year before the Olympic Games. All right, and Brazil was actually a fairly safe place to visit before then.
Right.
And we were doing this trip out in a fairly remote area, and we had hired this driver to take us around because we didn't know where we were going, and so we thought it was smart to have a driver. And he was great, really nice guy. But after a while, he got comfortable enough with us to share with us sort of what he was doing. And he worked for the government. I think maybe the state government. I'm not sure if it was the federal, but maybe the state government. And while he was driving us, and we were paying him, I think pretty well, his brother was clocking him in and out of his government job every day. So corruption has it's filtered down all the way through the different levels of government and society in a nation like Brazil. And until you can root that out, it's really hard to have the kind of success that the United States and other developed countries have had. Now, we have our fair share of corruption here too.
Sure.
But I don't think that it's at every level like it might be in some countries like Brazil.
Right.
It's just hardwired into the way some of these folks think. So I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that these new technologies can help these nations improve the life of their people. But I worry a lot that some people are just going to absorb a lot of this benefit themselves.
Sure.
And not let it filter through society.
Right.
So that's where the realist in me kind of says, well, hold on a second here. This might not turn out as good as we'd like it to, but I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that my skepticism is not well-founded. I hope that AI and humanoid robots are that massive step change that these countries have been looking for, and they can actually put it to good use.
Yeah. All right. I'll go along with your optimism there, although I take a look at North Korea versus South Korea, and I think to myself, well, there's probably going to be some folks that are left out of the revolution. But in the meantime, some folks will get there, and that'll be exciting.
The South Koreans can just send the humanoids walking across the border every day. We've come to help you. We're here to help you. Just invade them with kindness.
That's right. All right, Cern, thank you as always for bringing cheer and excitement and fun, as well as opportunities for people to utilize what we're showing to make wise investment decisions. That doesn't mean we've given you investment advice. It just means we've given you life advice or general advice or general direction based on not just stuff coming out of Cern's brain or my brain, but rather coming out of the composite brains that we've been able to resource from. And let us know in the comments below what you liked, what you didn't like. And Cern, again, thank you for joining us. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
My pleasure, Randy. Thank you.